Good morning, friends. Today we are going to be sharing about the affirmation for devotion in Swami Kriyananda's book, Affirmations for Self-Healing. So let's begin with a prayer, opening our hearts, calling on the divine ones, calling on the great masters of every path, of every religion, saints and sages of every religion, to come into our consciousness, to open our hearts, that our aspirations can be purified, that our desire for God can outweigh all other wants and needs and fleeting thoughts and desires. So as we pray and chant today, really fall into that spirit of devotion, opening our hearts to the divine ones. Divine Mother, Heavenly Father, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswar, and our beloved Guru, Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, humbly we bow at thy feet. Open our hearts that we may feel your loving presence in every moment of our lives, in every circumstance. Help us to uplift our consciousness, to be in tune with your divine will, to feel your energy flowing through us, acting as channels of your light. Help us to seek love, to share love, and to be expressions of divine love. Om, peace. Amen. This morning's chant is Door of My Heart, and Paramhansa Yogananda recommended chanting this whenever we feel that the divine presence, that divine presence has forsaken us. Whenever we feel that we are lost in our hearts, we want to call on the divine. Yogananda recommended that we chant this chant. So whether or not we're feeling forsaken by that divine presence, allow this chant to help us to attune to the heart's devotion, to the heart's longing that is directed up toward that divine being, that divine reality, which in essence we all are. That divine essence from which we came and into which we will merge again. In essence, we could really just spend the next 30 minutes together singing this chant, and it's all that needs to be said. It's more than all that needs to be said, because words themselves don't do justice to the vibration, the energy that comes through the chants. As many of us know, Paramahansa Yogananda told us that he has spiritualized each of these chants, that he has impregnated them with the consciousness of divinity, that he chanted them until he felt the call, the response from Divine Mother, from that divine consciousness, and impregnated that power into each of these chants. And so really all we would need to do in essence is sit down and chant this until we too can attune ourselves to that vibration of cosmic consciousness, to that vibration of the divine. Door of my heart, open wide, I keep for thee. If we can just keep that affirmation, that mantra in our mind over and over again, door of my heart, open wide, I keep for thee. Always asking ourselves in every situation to lean into that reality of love, to lean into that aspect of expansion, forgiveness, compassion, expansion, joy, bliss. When we experience these emotions, these, Swami Sri Yukteswar, who was Paramahansa Yogananda's guru, he talked about the 8 meannesses of the heart, which I won't list all of them now, but hatred and pride of pedigree and greed, these are the meannesses of the heart. Really what they are, those aspects of the heart that contract the heart. And the antidote for that, the opposite of that, is to chant this chant, door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee, to look for that expansion, that point of expansion, or that moment of expanding into every reality, whether we're interacting with somebody in our lives who is giving us a tough time, or whether we're embarking on a project professionally or personally that's causing a lot of angst or frustration. There's always a moment where we can choose, and often there's several moments along the journey that we can choose to lean into the expansion, or we can contract out of it. We can lean into compassion, or we can contract into hatred. And that choice is always available to us if we're conscious of it. And so keeping this chant, as I was chanting it and thinking about all of us singing together wherever we are in the world, door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee, wilt thou come just for once, come to me. If we can always be asking the divine presence, that cosmic consciousness, to come into the present moment and expand our hearts and open our hearts, then we're fighting the battlefield of life, as Swami Kriyananda tells us, or the battle of Kurukshetra, as we learn about in the Bhagavad Gita. It's these moments. It's these moments where we choose, am I going to expand or will I contract? And devotion is the linchpin that we can use to help us make that decision. Because where the feeling nature goes, where the desire goes, where our will goes, so too our energy follows. So that which we are, wherever we are directing our energy, that force of will that we're asserting in any circumstance or situation, the energy follows it. So if I'm directing my willpower at something that's contractive, then my energy rushes towards it. Or if I'm choosing to open my heart, to feel that devotion, to call on the divine, open wide I keep for thee, wilt thou come just for once, come to me. Just in those moments, if we can say in every moment, Divine Mother, come to me, be with me when I make this decision. Just yesterday, I will actually get to the affirmation, but all these thoughts were just coming to my mind as we were chanting. And then I'll pick up our book and we'll read together. But just yesterday, I was headed into a situation which just felt a little bit daunting to me. I wasn't fearful necessarily, but it was new and it was intense, and I wasn't quite sure where to go or what to think about it, and I was just a little anxious, I guess is the way to say it. And I sat in my car for a few moments before I had to go in and take care of the task that I was assigned to do. I just sat in the car and I meditated for a few minutes, and I called on each of the gurus in our line of gurus: Babaji Krishna, Jesus Christ, Lahiri, Sri Yukteswar, Yogananda, Swami Kriyananda, our teacher and guide who founded Ananda. I just called on each one of them and called on the light and said, let's go in together. And I was texting with one of my friends who knew that I was headed into this task that I needed to do. And I just said to her, okay, send us some ohms because the masters and I are going in. And throughout the whole experience, that's what it was. In every moment, anytime there was a little bit of hesitation or some, anxiety around the newness or what would happen next in the midst of this little task that I needed to complete, the masters were just right there with me. And I would say, okay, we need a little hit of your light now, or are you ready for this? And just talking to them in my mind the whole way. And that's that reality. It's that devotion. It's that, or let me rephrase that, that is devotion, because devotion is any time we're opening our heart and calling on the gurus and calling on that presence of divine consciousness to come in and to be with us, to direct us, to guide us in every little situation or big situation in our lives. Devotion is simply the desire to know that, or is the desire to put our faith in the divine, benevolent divine consciousness. And so if I'm headed into a task that's a little bit daunting and a little scary, and I'm apprehensive of it, I have a choice. I can contract into that fear and I can tense up and walk through it, and it was going to get done either way. So I could walk through it with a lot of fear and anxiety and tense up and contract the heart, or I can just relax and say, okay, here we go. Come on, Master, come with me. Come on, Sri Yukteswar, Yogananda, let's go. Let's feel the light. Let's open our hearts. Let's expand into this moment. And that's how we practice devotion. It's in those little moments calling on the Guru, wilt thou come, just for once come to me. Door of my heart, open wide into every aspect. It's not just about loving in terms of the human connection and relationships. It's about inviting that divine presence into every moment of our lives, calling on the gurus for the big things, the little things, and everything in between. So with that, let's actually read our affirmation for this week, or the brief summary of our affirmation for devotion. No good end is ever reached without devotion. No true success is achieved unless the heart's feelings are involved. No true success is achieved unless the heart's feelings are involved. What a powerful statement. Our heart, our desire, our willingness needs to be engaged in whatever the task may be. There may be material success, or success in terms of the outer definition or context of whatever we're doing. But if our heart is not engaged, if our desire to do well, our integrity, our willingness, if that's not engaged in the task that we're doing, then it's not true success. Willpower itself is a combination of energy and feeling directed toward fulfillment. The greater the will, the greater the flow of energy. The greater the flow of energy, the greater the magnetism. And that's ultimately the pathway that each one of us is trying to take as spiritual seekers. The greater the will, the greater the flow of energy. And as we know, everything is energy. So when we have mastered our energy, when we know how to redirect our energy from going in and out into the world, down and out into the world, into the material desires and professions and definitions and identities that we have outside of ourselves, when we can redirect that inward and upward through the heart to the point between the eyebrows, the point of Christ consciousness, then we've mastered our energy. Then we're moving toward mastery of our energy. And as we're moving toward mastery of our energy, then what we ultimately magnetize is the spiritual blessing. The greater the will, the greater the flow of energy. The greater the flow of energy, the greater the magnetism. And when we're on a journey toward truth, when we're on a journey toward self-mastery, that equation, which brings us to magnetism, is ultimately what we're seeking, because what we're magnetizing is the presence of the Guru, who of course is a channel for divine consciousness, or what we're magnetizing is divine consciousness itself in that essence. But it all begins with my will, Where is my will directed? If it's directed down and out toward the worldly success, toward the worldly identities that I've collected along the way in this lifetime, then the Guru just sits back and he waits. Just yesterday, or just the other day, on March 7th, which was Sunday, so 2 days ago, or 3 days ago now, we had a celebration for Yogananda's Maha Samadhi. And a Maha Samadhi is the final passing of a great enlightened being, an avatar as we call them, who is an enlightened being who has already achieved self-realization and incarnates in order to come back as a teacher and to help guide his disciples toward that place of oneness, toward that place of self-realization, which each one of us will ultimately achieve. That is the soul promise. That's God's promise, the promise of our own soul, that we will achieve that self-realization, that self-mastery that we're seeking through the redirection of our energy. And we had a beautiful service on Sunday to celebrate Yogananda's Maha Samadhi. And in the midst of it, there were several of us who were involved and engaged in about and just various aspects of the morning. And you could feel the attunement and the devotion from each person who came up to speak, from each person who helped to set up the altar, for each person who played music, the people who were helping to film and set up the tech, because obviously we're running things online. And it was such a beautiful expression of devotion. And what you felt in the midst of that was just synchronicity, harmony, joy, upliftment, and attunement. Because when we're in that flow, when the heart is open and we're expressing our gratitude and our devotion, our love toward that essence of divine consciousness, then everything flows in harmony, because that's the true essence of our reality. That's the true essence of the universe. Everything comes from that one source of divine consciousness, the cosmic Om, which has vibrated all of reality into existence. When we are open-hearted and calling upon that divine presence in our own lives, then we are inherently in that flow of harmony. And we're inherently in that flow of upliftment and of joy. And our energy, instead of going down and out into the world, it's automatically flowing upwards in tune with the divine consciousness. It all comes back to the heart. It comes back to our willingness. Our will, our hearts, where our feelings are stored, directs everything that we do in our lives. Every circumstance, Yogananda tells us this, circumstances are neutral. Every circumstance is neutral. That's a difficult thing for us to wrap our mind around, because the ego is engaged in this battlefield. This ego is engaged in that question of, will I expand or will I contract? And the ego wants to contract. I didn't get my way. This is a terrible thing. You know, whatever the circumstance may be. And so it's difficult for us to wrap our minds around what that really means. All circumstances are neutral. It's our feeling that we apply to the circumstance which gives it its connotation of being a positive experience or a negative experience. Let me continue on, and then we'll come back and we'll finish talking about it. I'm not going to get through the reading today if I don't keep going. In the quest for God, the unfolding of the heart's natural love in the form of deep devotion is the prime requisite for success. The unfolding of the heart's natural love in the form of deep devotion is the prime requisite for success. Without devotion, not a single step can be taken toward Him. Devotion is no sentiment. It is the deep longing to commune with and know the only reality there is. It is the deep longing to know the only reality there is. These moments of being able to tune into that truth, that true reality, just as I was expressing with this Maha Samadhi celebration that we had the other day, when everyone's heart was open and directed in devotion, in gratitude toward that divine consciousness, or the expression of that divine consciousness as we celebrate through the Guru Paramahansa Yogananda, through the spiritual teacher Paramahansa Yogananda, when everything was directed, everything that was happening, down to the candles being lit, the harmonia being played, the flower petals being placed upon the altar, the speaking, the readings, everything that was done with an expression of devotion. Therefore, everything flowed in that harmony because everything was being directed back to, as Swami Kriyananda tells us, the deep longing to commune with and to know the only reality there is. The only reality there is love. God is love. There is no other reality outside of that. So as I was discussing where I was before I picked up that second paragraph leads directly into what I wanted to share about it, which is that circumstances are neutral. It's the feeling that we apply to it that brings it its connotation of positive or negative, that the divine is just as present in every single moment and aspect of our lives. And we can actually test this theory out. I was just testing this theory out the other day. In my professional life, there are a lot of changes happening right now in my professional life as a high school teacher. And I was watching as things changed and people had a myriad of reactions to it as things began to change, and the way that we've been teaching is about to shift, and there were so many different reactions. And it was just like the metaphor that Paramahansa Yogananda uses of waves crashing upon the sea. And you could feel these tidal waves of emotion up and down in every which way: happiness, sadness, joy, anger, frustration, confusion. And in the midst of it, because I was swirling around in this sea of emotion and just watching so many different reactions, it's sort of that idea, if I stand here and I look at just, I have blinders on like a horse would wear in a carriage, and I'm just looking at this one perspective, I can only see as far as my blinders will allow me. But if I take one step to the right and I have my blinders up still, I can see a completely different perspective. And it was sort of that idea that I was standing in the midst of watching so many people around me having various reactions that I was able to recognize from a yogic standpoint, wow, this circumstance is completely neutral. And I could see it because all around me, if there were 100 people in the room, there were 100 different perspectives, and there were 100 different opinions of what the right answer should be. And there were feelings of joy and as I said, frustration. There was such a dichotomy that was happening that all around me that I was able to sit right in the midst of it and open my heart and say, I trust whatever is happening as coming through you, as your divine will. I trust that in this moment I can practice pure contentment, that I can open my heart and I can feel that this circumstance is neutral, and that I can charge into it, just like I shared that story that I went through yesterday, where I brought my warriors of light with me and I brought all the masters into that circumstance with me. I can do that in every single moment. And it was such a blessing for me to experience just that stillness of contentment as the tidal waves were crashing up and down. I was as still as glass on the seashore, on the windless day, just barely a wave, just watching everything that was happening around me and saying, I go forth in perfect faith. One of the next, that's a different affirmation that we're going to be practicing here. But this is the essence of devotion. If my heart were contracted, if I were reacting in anger, in fear, if I were reacting in any way other than to listen for God's call within, to listen for the call of the divine, and to look for that expression of love, because that expression of love is present in every single moment. God manifested the universe, and God is love. There is no other reality, as Swami Kriyananda tells us here. It's when we choose to commune with the divine, when we choose to open our hearts in devotion, that we are tuning to the only reality there is. And in the midst of whatever storm or trial we're facing, if we can remember that and look for love, look for divine love. And if we can't feel it or muster the courage in ourselves to at least open our hearts and say, you're coming along with me. I know you're here. I'm listening for you. Then we're taking step by step, we're moving closer to living in that divine reality, living in attunement, just like we experienced in the story I was sharing from Sunday in Yogananda's Maha Samadhi. Everything just coalesced perfectly. Everything flowed beautifully because everyone was serving with devotion. Everyone was tuning into the only reality there is. And so what happens is we vibrate with that harmony. We vibrate in tune. We harmonize with that truth, with that reality, that there is only one truth, love. That there is only one expression that we need to realize, and that is the expression of God's divine love. And so the affirmation that we can practice this week, which helps us to attune to that even more closely, it comes along with great power, because devotion is not passive. Opening our heart is not sitting back and just allowing or waiting for that divine love to find us. We have to reach up to feel God. We have to reach up to receive divine grace. We don't just wait passively for grace to shower down upon us. And so our affirmation, with the sword of devotion, I sever the heartstrings that tie me to delusion. We pick up the sword in the battlefield of life. Will I expand or will I contract? With the sword of devotion, I sever the heartstrings that tie me to delusion. I will expand. I will open my heart. With the deepest love, I lay my heart at the feet of Omnipresence. First, it's picking up the sword of devotion, severing the heartstrings with all our willpower, all our energy, directing all of our desire up toward the one true reality, not out into the world and into the little accomplishments that we can collect and store away, but that will fade at the end of this lifetime. But I will direct my energy, my devotion, my desires, my willingness toward the one true reality, the reality of God's love. And then the second part of that is then to surrender. With the deepest love, I lay my heart at the feet of Omnipresence. We pick up the sword with great energy and willingness. Then in gratitude and devotion, we lay ourselves at the feet of Omnipresence, at that expression of divine consciousness. So to end today, I'll read our affirmation one more time, and you can repeat it mentally in your own mind. With the sword of devotion, I sever the heartstrings that tie me to delusion. With the deepest love, I lay my heart at the feet of Omnipresence. There is only one true reality. Through all of life's trials, my prayer will be, our prayer will be, reveal thyself. Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Never stop calling on the divine. No matter the expression, no matter the experience, no matter the feelings that we have entering into any circumstance, whether it's whether it's anxiety, whether it's fear, whether it's joy itself, always lean in, always say, Divine Mother, I'm bringing you with me. Wilt thou come just for once? Will my days fly away without seeing thee? Never. Always call on the divine. Come with me. Here we go into the next battle. I pick up my sword and I offer my heart. I offer everything I am. I have faith and I walk forward with contentment, with joy, and I will never stop seeking your presence. Reveal thyself. Reveal thyself. God bless you.